Sebastian Saavedra, two words that may make IndyCar fans from the early to mid-2010s violently ill. He's a driver who many, myself included, consider to be one of the worst drivers in recent IndyCar history, and one of the worst of all time as well. Whether it be from his crash-prone nature to his overall poor results, Saavedra's reputation is clear as mud, and I doubt this video will help. But this right here is a well overdue video. This is a video that's been on my bucket list ever since I made a video going over Saavedra's career when I was 16. I'm now finally getting around to covering it, and what a season it is. This isn't just Saavedra's worst season in his IndyCar career, this is possibly the single most pitiful season I've covered on this channel. Today, I tell the story of Sebastian Saavedra's horrible 2013 IndyCar season. After a year driving part-time for Andretti Autosports, Saavedra was set to return full-time. On February 12, 2013, it was announced that Saavedra would drive for Dragon Racing in the number 6 car. His teammate was another Sebastian Bourdais that is. The two created one of the most contrasting driver lineups in the history of the sport. Now, I briefly mentioned that Saavedra was racing part-time in 2012, but I think I should give you a closer look at that. On the IndyCar side of things, Saavedra only raced 3 times, these being the Indy 500, the Grand Prix of Sonoma, and the Fontana season finale. So how did he do in the races? Well, he DNF'd in 2 of them, Indy and Fontana, and finished okay in Sonoma. The DNFs were down to electrical issues, no skin off his back, while Sonoma saw him bring it home in P15. Besides the Sonoma result and a P10 star in Fontana, it was a forgettable season to most. But the way I see it, it was a bad year. Andretti won the championship that season with Ryan Hunter-Reay, so a fluke top 10 start and a top 15 run being your best results of the season is nothing to be proud of. 2013 was going to be an uphill climb, getting used to a new team, along with a chassis that he had only raced 3 times up to that point. But even taking that into mind doesn't make the season any better because good lord this year was painful to look at. St. Pete was where it all kicked off, and it was a weekend that summarized how Saavedra's season went quite nicely. Sebastian would qualify for the race in a very impressive 9th. However, come race day, it all went downhill. Firstly, he broke his front wing in this collision with James Jakes during the morning warm-up. Then in the race, he fell back almost immediately after the start of the race, then collided with J.R. Hildebrand in turn 10 on lap 28, sending Hildebrand into the wall. Quite fittingly, Saavedra's race would end in the same spot less than 50 laps later, taking him out of the race and bringing an end to a miserable first race, the first of many this season. Actually, before we move on from St. Pete, I want to bring attention to this little incident that he had only a few laps before he hit the wall, so you can make that 4 incidents on the day, 3 in the race itself. Barber was an equally depressing race, as yet another 9th place start would convert into a 20th place finish. There are no external factors as to why he ended up there, he was just slow. Next up was Long Beach, and oh my god. This weekend for Saavedra features some of the most absent-minded driving I've ever seen point blank period. In the second practice session, he had an embarrassing crash in turn 1 where after outbraking himself and spinning it around in the runoff area, he then rejoined the track, spun it, and hit the wall anyways. Then in the third practice session, he would nearly wipe himself and James Jakes off the track after this close call towards the far end of the track. Then come qualifying, Saavedra would qualify in a measly 20th. And finally, only 2 laps into the race itself, he cleaned himself out and wrecked his race car after this absent-minded move on Simone Di Silvestro. That wasn't a slight overshoot. He was probably going about 60 miles an hour too fast for that turn. That wasn't even close. And with that accident ends the weekend from hell. Sao Paulo was not a good weekend, with Saavedra starting 20th and finishing 19th. But at least it wasn't the steaming ball of crap that Long Beach was, so at least there's a molecularly thin silver lining. The trend of crashing continued in Indianapolis, as after qualifying 27th, Saavedra would crash out of the race in this bizarre accident in the north end. So we're 5 races into the season now, and so far Saavedra has crashed out of 3 races, and has a best finish of 19th in Sao Paulo. This was a really bad start to the year, and even though things would get somewhat better, it still wasn't a bed of roses. The doubleheader in Detroit gave us the elusive Colombian double birdie, but we'll get to that momentarily. Sebastian put in a great qualifying performance, starting the first Detroit duel in 10th. Come time for the race, however, things went to hell only 32 laps in, as he was punted into the wall by Marco Andretti going into turn 5. Saavedra wasn't very happy, and showed his displeasure as Andretti drove past. I once said that this double middle finger he gave to Marco was the best form of coordination he showed near a race car all year, and despite the fact that nearly 2 years has passed since I first started that quote, it's still pretty accurate. The second race in Detroit was actually really good, as he started 11th, kept it clean and brought it home in P10, getting not just his first top 10 of the season, but his first IndyCar top 10 period. things turned down the next race at Texas, where an 18th place start and a 14th place finish wasn't the best in the world, but still not that bad. Milwaukee was pretty good, with Saavedra starting P6, his best qualifying performance of the season. Even though he lost positions in the race proper, finishing P13, it was still an alright run. The same couldn't be said about Iowa, where Saavedra would finish P19 from an 18th place start. Pocono was once again filled with struggles, but it was an odd one. Saavedra would start 18th and retire from the race in 23rd, but for the first and only time this season, it wasn't down to a crash, as it was throttle issues that ended Saavedra's race only 2 laps in. Toronto is where things got even worse. His qualifying was crap, with starting spots of 24th and 21st in the 2 races respectively. Then in the races themselves, Saavedra would only come home in 16th and 15th. Mid-Ohio was also a pretty pitiful performance, where Sebastian started 20th and brought home in 19th. Despite the fact that most of the results during this part of the season were pretty atrocious, the one good thing to come from this stretch of races, besides the top 10 in Detroit, was the fact that Saavedra kept it clean. When it comes to a driver with a reckless reputation, having a few month period with not a lot of incidents to speak of is an achievement. Unfortunately, this trend wouldn't continue to the season finale. Sonoma was the start of it all, with Saavedra having a roller coaster weekend. A 20th place start wasn't good, but things would get even worse in the race. Saavedra was running 3rd on the lap 25 restart when going into turn 2 he rear-ended James Hinchcliffe, broke his front wing, and gave himself a penalty. Things would get even worse, as with 4 laps to go Saavedra had a hard crash in the chicane, ending his race and totaling his race car. This was now his 6th DNF of the year. Then it was time for Baltimore, where after an incident in practice 2 and a 19th place run in qualifying, Saavedra turned a pretty bad weekend around to finish the race in 8th. This would turn out to be Saavedra's best ever race result in his IndyCar career. The Houston doubleheader was incident-free, but still not good. Saavedra qualified 19th and 24th in the 2 races before finishing 12th and 14th respectively. Not much else to discuss. Then to close the season at the 2-mile oval of Fontana, Saavedra would end the year in this crash in turn 3 with Pippa Mann. It was a fitting end to a wretched year. The reputation Saavedra has as a severely crash-prone driver can trace at least some of its roots to this season. From my count, Saavedra was involved in 12 incidents this year, with the only non-crash-related incident being the Code Brown moment in Long Beach. Saavedra also DNF'd 7 times, with 6 of them being down to crashes. The incidents were a massive issue this year, but even taking that into mind, there are very few awe-inspiring moments from the year. Saavedra only scored 2 top 10s, which while pretty miserable, is actually the most he ever scored in a single season. However, one of the fairest comparisons you can give in motorsports is comparing teammates. His teammate Sebastian Bourdais, who had a poor season in his own regard, wiped the floor with Saavedra. Bourdais had 6 top 10s, 4 top 5s, 3 podiums, a best finish of 2nd, and finished the year with 370 points, putting him in 11th place in the point standings. Saavedra, meanwhile, only had 2 top 10s, a best finish of 8th, and ended the year with 236 points, 134 less than his teammate, placing him in 21st in the driver standings, last of all full-time drivers. Saavedra was only 3 points away from being beaten by Oriol Servia, who only raced 12 times that season. Saavedra was by a wide margin the worst driver from the 2013 season, and it's not even close. With 2 top 10s, 7 DNFs, 12 incidents in 17 race weekends, an average start of 17.7, an average finish of 18.3, and a 21st place points finish, Sebastian Saavedra's 2013 IndyCar season was one of the most embarrassingly dreadful seasons in IndyCar history, and the worst from an equally bad IndyCar career. Thank you for watching, and have a great afternoon.